Welcome to Italics, television for the Italian American experience. I'm your host, Anthony Tamburri. With us this month is Mark Rotella, American author and the director of the Koch Institute for the Italian Experience in America at Montclair State University. Rotella is the author of two books, Stolen Figs and Other Adventures in Calabria, and Amore, the story of Italian American song. His writing has also appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Salon, the Washington Post, the Village Voice, and American Heritage, among others. Now let's join Mark Rotella. Mark, welcome to Italics. We're glad to have you.
Anthony, thank you so much. As you know, you and I have been working together on various projects for over a decade now. So I got to say, this is a real thrill for me to be able to talk to you. I mean, you have been with me, and Calandra has been with me throughout my entire publishing career. And I got to say, I absolutely love all the programming you guys do. It's grown, and it's just really fantastic. So we aren't coming together as strangers here, but as people who've worked together.
You have and continue to wear a number of hats. First and foremost, you're a writer. So you're the author of two books with Feroce Jashin-Giraud. One, Stolen Figs, which is a type of autobiography of going back to Italy to discovering your roots to some degree. And the other one, of course, is Amore, and it is basically a history of Italian Americans and music in the United States. So tell us a little bit about these books, because while I know they've been bestsellers, that there are still people out there, I'm sure, who are looking at us who perhaps, if not missed one, maybe have missed both titles.
These books came about through a discovery of a search for my own identity as an Italian American. And they kind of came out accidentally. And in fact, writing about things Italian American for me was almost happenstance. And I had been writing fiction before. And after a trip to Calabria, where my family's from, with my father, I convinced him to go for a trip to see his homeland where he hadn't been in over 30 years and didn't think anyone lived there. But it was then that I talked to my agent, and she said, "Oh, I think this is your book." So from there, it was an exploration of being Italian American versus Italian. But it was also kind of a history of a region, Calabria, which at the time very few people had written about. And then after that book, I started searching for other ideas, which were not necessarily themed on Italian or Italian America. However, I started recalling when my father used to listen to some of this old music, and it was really right around the time Big Night came about, a little after that. And I started thinking, why are there so many Italians in America who are coming up with these singers? Why so many of them are Italian? So that led to Amore. So it was kind of a history, or a kind of a study as to how Italians assimilated through music, but also how they gave style to pop music in America. And then afterwards, the publisher FSG asked me to write, given my experience in Calabria, write an introduction to Christ Stopped at Eboli by Carlo Levi. It was the reissue of that about Basilicata, but of course, Calabria, Basilicata are so close, and they had the same kind of poverty even to this day, the remoteness, the mountain area. So that was a thrill to write the introduction for that. So those are the three things. And again, they all kind of came about, and I'm happy I was able to do that and hope to continue.
So let's go back to Amore, because you're right. The presence of Italians or Italian Americans, whether they were immigrants, whether they were therefore Italians, whether they were sons and daughters, grandsons and granddaughters, great-grandsons and great-granddaughters, even today, right? We can think of a couple of them. There's what's called the Blonde Trail, I would call it, from maybe even as far back as Debbie Harry, even though she's not Italian-American, but who gives way to Madonna, who gives way to Gwen Stefani, who gives way to, well, then there was also, before that, Cyndi Lauper, I guess we can say, is a sort of pioneer among our sisters, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so on and so forth, down to Lady Gaga. right? The history of jazz, for example, people like Joe Venuti, Eddie Lang, I think was another name, Louis Prima, things like that, right? These are people that we forget. They're so much part of the quote unquote American fabric. Sometimes people forget that they're Italian.
I have to say, this all started back before jazz with opera and with Enrico Caruso, who just by virtue of the number of records he sold, released on Victor Victrola, was the first pop star in America. So America's first gold and platinum selling pop star was an Italian opera singer. Opera, the whole idea of bel canto and the opening of the vowels that is inherent in the Italian language, all of that kind of found its way and allowed so many Italians, Americans of Italian descent, to sing. It was part of their style. It was part of their personality. It was part of the language. So we have that. So then you move on to jazz, and you have Louis Prima, who really brought a new sound to jazz. And he wrote Sing, 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 even though Betty Goodman made it popular. I mean, he wrote Sing, Sing, Sing. And you could hear, even there, a kind of call and response that he got from Louis Armstrong, from the musicians. And remember, in New Orleans, it was Blacks and Italians, all who lived together. They all played together in Storyville, at various whorehouses, at bars, at dens. And so they all kind of learned, Louis Prima was picking this up. For the first time, or one of the first time, Italian was heard on pop radio, on top 40 radio.
I heard that Louis Prima would be kept out of white clubs because he was considered, quote unquote, too dark. And that it wasn't until he played the Apollo, which of course was the launching pad for African Americans, right? It wasn't until he played the Apollo that the more famous clubs, quote unquote, white clubs, finally invited him to play.
That was one of the things when he came up to 57th Street and played in some of the jazz clubs there. They looked at him and they said, wait a minute, he's Black. He can't play here. And you're right. He started playing up at the Apollo. And then he brought in some of his band members. And this is also because he was playing with a white band and you couldn't have down there Black and white performers on the same stage. So this changed. He ended up playing down there. And this is where I think so many of who we know of as the jazz greats who were playing up in Harlem, playing up at the Apollo, after their sets were done, they would go down and hear Louis Prima play. He was just fun. He just exuded fun entertainment.
The other thing that people don't understand or don't know, doo-wop music, rock and roll, doo-wop music, right?
Each night I ask the stars up above, why must I be a teenager in love?
Chidi out in the Belmonts and Johnny Meister on the Brooklyn Bridge and so on and so forth, who were big back then. And I think a lot of people don't realize that many of those people, even those who maybe didn't have Italian sounding last names, were in fact Italian American.
So we did have a whole decade nearly of mostly African American groups, vocal harmonization groups, what would become known, and doo-wop came in as a little later on. But it was Dion in 1962 that came on the scene with Dion and the Belmonts. And these young men grew up in the streets of the Bronx. They hung out there. They sang, as people would say, under lampposts. Their recording studio, their place was under lampposts or in vestibules where you could get the perfect echo. The Bronx, the inner city of Bronx, of Italian Bronx along Arthur Avenue.
I'm thinking of the opening of A Bronx Tale.
Correct. Absolutely. Yes.
Love you like I do.
What do you want, man? You got room there for us. You win.
Don't know why I love you. Don't know why I care. I just want your love to share. I wonder why I love you like I do. Is it because I think you love me too?
When you hear I Wonder Why, it starts off with this deep, what almost dun dun dun, which almost sounds like, to me, like the revving of a 1957 Corvette engine. And this was like, again, another like auto reference. And these the four of them would snap their fingers, do a little dance, not quite as much, but they had an attitude about them that was in hindsight very Italian.
You also, what could we say, worked, quote unquote, behind the scenes. You were senior editor at Publishers Weekly, which is, of course, the magazine where everyone who publishes a book hopes that sometime in their life they may get a review in the Publishers Weekly, right? Because if you get the Publishers Weekly, that's it. You can now die happily as a writer. So you worked there for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm confident if I say a good number of Italian American writers came across your desk, you would say yes.
Absolutely. And the same thing with, and I know you also have a hand with Bordighera Press in publishing, and know how difficult it is, first of all, once you get a submission, to finally get it published, and then to find its way into the marketplace. And that is really hard. And so, yes, when I was definitely a champion of Italian American authors as I saw them come through, meaning I would, many of them would have had their books reviewed anyway, but I wanted to make sure that they did find a voice, as I did with so many other with African American writers that I saw, with new Latinx writers coming through. But yeah, I did, and I saw a slew of Italian American authors, not all talking about Italian American themes. And I saw it coming up through poetry. And obviously there's a long tradition of Italian poetry. We could go all the way back to Dante, of course, even further, but even more recently, Diane di Prima, who recently died. And I was also a really big Beat, and was really amazed at the influence Italians had on the Beats during the 50s. Gregory Corso, the opening of City Lights Bookstore, yet another poet. So of all of these Italians throughout this theme, this was an early, when I was in high school, passion of mine, and I noticed so many of these names growing up in Florida where I wouldn't necessarily hear Italian names. The other one I saw were in kids' books and picture books. I see a lot of Italian American names coming up through picture books, and this is one of the ways. This is one of the arenas where publishing is still exploding. That in cookbooks, and we know we're always going to see Italian American names in cookbooks. I still am not seeing the number of Italian Americans published as much as I would like to. Obviously we have the Don DeLillos, we have more recently Christopher Castellani, so we have a lot of great Italian journalists.
The New York Times is full of them, right? The New York Times is
Absolutely.
full of, and they're young. They're in their late 30s to maybe late 40s.
This is where we're seeing them. You're right. The New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. We're seeing so many Italian names, or so many even Americans of Italian descent. I don't see them
Yeah.
as much. We have been seeing them come through in fiction. We do have Don DeLillo. There are many great names that are pushing the form. And I have to say, one who I think is who she died a couple of years ago is Louise DeSalvo. She was a professor at Hunter College, lived here in Montclair. We had an award in her name here for creative nonfiction, and that was it for creative nonfiction. And I found she is so influential. I teach one of her writing, at least one, in all of my classes, just because I feel that she has such a powerful, though subtle voice and subtle hand.
Exactly. Yeah. And you mentioned Don DeLillo, and here is a man who has won numerous awards, whose books have been bestsellers. All of them have been bestsellers. And of course, he does 1997, he comes out with Underworld, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's still a sort of say insensitivity, quote unquote, without being really critical and without critiquing. But there's a readership yet that hasn't developed, I think. I don't know. You would know a little bit more about it, perhaps, from your perspective.
Okay, Underworld is probably his biggest, most popular book to date among this generation. White Noise before that. But I do feel that with him and a few others, it's and while it was on the bestseller list, you're not going to get the readership. And it was only in Underworld where he actually even talked about being Italian. I mean, in none of his books before that, his writing is can be kind of challenging. But his writing has inspired so many writers today. I can tell you the number of people who have claimed him to be an inspiration for their own writing.
So speaking of writers and other cultural articulations, you now have a new hat that you're wearing, and you're in your office of your new hat. And that is, you're now the director of the Cocha Institute for Italian Experience in America. You're only there not too long. You went through your first annual symposium for which the Cocha Institute has really become popular, famous, well-known, because it is, and I've always said this when I was involved in the judging of the competition, it's the model for everybody all over the United States who are teaching Italian, wanting to have symposia, et cetera. It is the model and has a wonderful award. You're one of us now. We welcome you.
Wow, I never thought I would be here. It's great to be here. And it's really great to have this discussion. I mean, and to be able to have discussions with you, not just support Italian-American writers and culture, but to have smart discussions about it. My hope is at the Cocha Institute is to join that discussion out here in New Jersey to promote Italian-American writers, scientists, business people, singers, musicians. And this is something that I hope to do here through lecture series in ways that the Cocha Institute did 12, 13 years ago, 14 years ago.
Yeah.
So this is something that I hope to do. And really, for me, I think working with other institutions is key. I'm also teaching here. I'm a professor here. I teach creative writing as well, which I've been doing as an adjunct, but now it's just all part of it too. Now I've been here just about 3 months, so I've been talking to a lot of people, thinking about the direction that's best for the Cocha Institute, in New Jersey at Montclair State, but also throughout the country and the world. one of the things I would really like to do is to, like I said, start a lecture series here, a speaker series, and to have people come to Montclair State University, but also Montclair, which is a big mecca for publishing and media itself, and to bring together the community from Unico through academia and the general public. And I feel that there are many topics and people who can speak on all matters. And I think also working with the students here at Montclair State, the Italian-American majors of Italian, but also Italian-American students, which is a huge population here at Montclair State, which I know it is throughout CUNY and especially Queens College.
I want to give a shout out to Unico because I think that Joseph Culture was very much involved in Unico on a national level. And a number of decades ago, it's got to be a good 3, maybe 4 decades ago, I know he, and I'm going to mention another person, and I hope I'm not leaving anyone out, but I'll take the hit for this. But I think he and Frank Canada, who is an alum of Seton Hall, another New Jersey, another New Jersey institution, he and Frank Canada, I think the two of them and some others, and I don't know who the others were, launched that program that they then, for which they now have created something like 5 or 6 distinguished professorships or endowed professorships. And one, of course, is there at Montclair. There's another one at Seton Hall. I bring up Seton Hall because our friend Bill Connell is there. You have today our friend Teresa Fiore. And there's Connecticut, the University of Connecticut, Sergio Luzzati, whom I don't know. There's our other friend, Claudine de Donato, out in California. So there are a number of these Unico chairs. You know, we're on the same page here, and that is the idea of education, the idea of making sure Italian and Italian-American phenomena, let's say, facts and characters, names, etc., get into the general education curriculum for us to get where we probably should be, where DeLillo is mentioned more frequently, let's say, or even Wally Lamb is mentioned more frequently, a writer without an Italian last name, but who is very Italian in some ways.
And I think there's just great potential for conversation on all subjects, fun and controversial alike, that everyone can join on.
We're in this period of discussing, debating Columbus. And my hope is that, however that turns out, it's a much more complex issue for us to deal with here. But my hope is that that will bring attention to other important issues, you know, that need to be addressed, and that we can finally address those other issues. The way I see it is, it's just a complexity of issues that we have to address from various angles. I don't know if I'm just being Pollyannish or if I'm just being hopeful, but I think I have already seen signs of that, of people saying, okay, yeah, there's this issue, but then there are these other issues that we need to address as well.
I don't feel that you're being Pollyannish at all, because I too have seen the same trend of conversations coming together.
So we have our work cut out for us. We'll definitely do it together. That river is not a big river.
No. Not at all.
It's a very small river to cross, and I think we can definitely, do some good things. So
no, it's actually you're right, a very small passable river by bridge or by tunnel.
It's a really great venue for all sorts of events. You know, it really is. And it's a pretty campus.
It is, and it's growing. I'm also going to take you to a couple of good old red sauce joints here too. Again, I've known you for a long time, and I'm just thrilled to, the possibility, which we will do, to work to communicate, to have dialogue, and just working with you in the future.
Good. We look forward to it as well. I wish you and yours a happy holiday season as they come up on us in the next couple of weeks, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Ciao.
Thanks for watching this episode of Italics. We at the Kleiner Institute, at Italics, as well as CUNY TV, wish you all a happy holiday season. Arrivederci alla prossima puntata, gennaio 2021.